Greetings, nerds. This is Scene and Nerd. I'm your host, Sarah Belmont, and with me, as always, is our Mr. Producer, Will Polk. How are you doing tonight, Will?
Doing very well, Sarah. How you doing this evening?
Doing fine. I just want to get through today so that tomorrow can happen, and then it's the weekend.
It's the weekend. Yeah, you have much going on this weekend?
No, no. I have schoolwork, but still, I want to be done with work right now.
Yeah, I
So,
hear you.
yeah. You should know better. Sarah, do you have a life? No.
Yeah. Well,
Been on
school,
hold for
work.
3 years, so
Yeah, home stretch.
yeah. So, meanwhile, today we got some news, some very exciting news from DC as Matt Reeves dropped both the pictures of the new Batsuit and some of the score, classic comic book movie scores.
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this, Will. You got to help me out here.
Yeah, so we did get the suit. We've been wondering when we would get a glimpse of it, and it was a little Valentine's Day love letter to the fans from Matt Reeves today. The suit, a lot of people obviously on Twitter, of course, this Batman was number one, and then closely behind it was Daredevil, because I think the red hues and the bat suit reminded a lot of people of the Daredevil suit, and also I guess the score that was accompanied the video that Matt Reeves dropped. It definitely was your typical soaring score for a comic book film. It definitely had that Batman mood, I thought. So I definitely am excited. I think the suit reminds me also of, and I saw this a lot too, the Batman Arkham
Uh-huh.
uh, Batsuit. So those were the sort of the general trends that we were seeing on people's reactions to the
Right.
suit. But
Yeah, I think that why we're getting so many Daredevil comparisons is because this movie is the first, well, quote unquote, the first time we see a young Bruce Wayne
right,
who's coming in it. So it's not an origin movie, but it's also he's not Ben Affleck Batman, who's the
yeah,
old man who might need to retire soon.
yeah, he's not the grizzled vet, definitely not.
Yeah, and on the show Daredevil, they started off with him growing into becoming Daredevil, and the suit evolved and was put together, and I think that's what they got. We know why. We now know why they hired Robert Pattinson for this role, and it's because of that damn chin, and
Yeah,
it's like perfect in the cheekbones, and they put that on full display. So I'm not mad at it. I'm not mad at it at all.
not at all. Yeah,
So I'm like, man, Matt Reeves did not want to cover because in other bat suits, it's felt very square
mhm,
and very like, yeah, you could tell somebody's face is in there, but it's a mask. It
yeah,
felt more like a mask as opposed to, I don't know, something over his face. And this is becoming a very weird conversation all of a sudden. So I'm just going to move forward to the Oscars because I'm going to find myself in some hot water if I keep going on these weird tangents about explaining what I quote unquote know about costume design, which I know nothing. Well, so
hey,
Oscars, Parasite sweeps.
yeah.
I have not seen that movie.
I was hoping to watch it this week. But it didn't happen. So
I think so many of us saw Parasite win and win and win and win. And we were all thinking, man, I need to sit down and watch it. And then
yep.
you look at the runtime, two and a half hours, or 2 hours and 15 minutes. And I'm like, that's a commitment.
That is. I was like, I could break it up and do 1 hour tonight and do another hour the next night, but I will watch it. I definitely want to see what. Obviously, it made Best Picture, won 4 awards. I made international film, director.
It killed it. It
Yeah,
killed it.
yeah, and it's a very interesting fact. I was is when I was prepping for the show tonight. I was reading an article about obviously it was history making film in that it was the first international film to win Best Picture, and they were talking about the demographics in this article. They were discussing the demographics of the Oscar voters, and this year it was about 20% international. I did not realize that until I saw that, and so maybe that, I don't know how much that went into it, but it definitely did. I think it probably did play a role.
So much played a role in that. And no, I haven't seen it, so I can't say this, but I just hope when I do sit down and watch it, I walk away and say, yeah, I get it. I get it now.
Yeah.
I will be very upset if I'm like, nope, still don't get it.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I know of the 10 films I've watched, 1917, I watched Joker, and working my way through, I do plan to sit down and watch Ford v Ferrari at some point, even though everyone, that one never really did seem like it was going to get much traction beyond, it went editing.
Too commercial. I mean, it never felt like when you're competing with films that are praised for originality, for twisting narratives and really providing social commentary. Art house films, albeit, and then you have Ford versus Ferrari.
Yeah, exactly.
There's something that never felt like quite the same, despite everyone saying it was a great experience, and they're not mad that they took the time to watch the movie, which is another 2.5-hour movie.
Yeah.
What's driving me crazy, Will, is that I used to be someone who I would knock out movies all the time. I would be the person who's like, well, I've seen all of this. When the heck are we going to get that new release? And now I'm constantly like, it's too much of a commitment. And instead I fall down these weird YouTube holes.
and you realize 2.5 hours later, I could have watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yeah. But 1917, who? They got shut out. And I am one of the people who I'm kind of like, okay, I kind of like that, because I either my expectations were way too high for 1917, or it's a flash in a pan, because there was something about my experience where I was like, okay, I get it. It's one shot, spoiler alert. Mm-hmm. But it never really hit me. I'm glad. So it just was a story, and I'm like, okay, flash. Yeah. I'm probably never gonna watch it again.
Yeah, I doubt I'll watch it again. Well, I did enjoy it. It did hit me. As far as, there were a couple scenes. There were 2 scenes in particular. I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't watched it, but I definitely jumped out of my seat when I was in the theater. But it was a good film, and again, since I haven't seen all 10 films that are nominated for Best Picture, but have seen it versus Joker, I could see. I thoroughly enjoyed Joker, but if I had to rank them, I would have to still. I would give the edge to 1917 over Joker, as far as a better overall film.
I will say that, because I have seen Joker again. And as soon as it started, I thought to myself, "Oh dear Lord, why am I watching this movie again?" It's not one of those movies where it's awful. It's so unrewatch, you can't watch it again because it's so bad. But it's just a depressing ass movie, and it's it makes you feel uncomfortable. I was shocked by how much my mom liked that movie. It was really funny. But there were scenes where I would be get up and deliberately walk around. And plus, and I stand by that, 20 minutes of that movie is just Joaquin Phoenix dancing around in his underwear. Nobody wants that. Yeah. Nobody wants that. So.
Yeah. See what? Why'd you have to? Yeah. That's why I cut you off, because I don't want to visual that again. I saw it. I don't need to see it again. Even though, congratulations to Joaquin for. That was obviously, it went as expected, and as far as winners. And it's funny. I was thinking about our conversation last week when Brad Pitt won, and about how underappreciated he is. And even though he has won Oscars before for production, this was his first one for acting.
Mm-hmm.
So this, so I was very happy to see that, because I was like, hey, we called something.
Yeah, I liked his speech.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that he got one, and maybe I mean he still has so much more to do now, and I don't know what it's going to do to his career. But I'm happy for him. I'm happy for Phoenix. Joaquin Phoenix, despite what I just said about the Joker movie, his performance is unreal in it.
Yeah,
and
it is.
and my mom even commented on that. She just looked at me halfway through the movie and said, he is doing very good acting, like extremely well. And she never pays attention to crap like that. And I'm like, yes he is. Yes, he is. And he's in every single scene in that movie. Mm-hmm. And that's somebody said it recently, where Oscar voters, they vote on the winners for who did the most acting, especially in the top categories. And that's why Adam Driver, despite killing it in Marriage Story, didn't have a chance, because he had a partner. He had half of that story is told through Scarlett Johansson's character. Mm-hmm. So he owns only half of the movie. So it's really interesting where, yes, the performance matters, but also the roles, that'll give you the edge on who ends up taking home that trophy or not.
Yeah. Speaking of not taking any trophies home, just have to put out there, Avengers Endgame did not, and it's another history-making thing where, with this year's Oscars, where the highest-grossing film did not win in any category, and it had been nominated for Best Visual Effects, but it was shut out.
Should not factor into it,
Yeah. Oh, I know. It was just a very interesting historical note, given how history making this year's Oscars were.
Yeah. I think that at Endgame, I've rewatched it. I still prefer Infinity War. Endgame, I'm not gonna say it's a bad movie, but at the end of the day, half of it's just a fight scene.
Yeah.
It's a really long fight scene.
Right.
And then the other half is time travel, and everybody, it's so convoluted. And I'll still watch it. Like, put me on another 3 or 4 hour plane ride, I'll put an Endgame any time, because it'll get through it.
Yeah, it's definitely popcorn film material, but yeah, I thought I thought this year's show was actually, usually I don't get as invested in the Oscars, but for whatever reason this year I did, and
I'm rubbing off on you.
Yeah, I think you are.
Because I didn't watch it.
I actually sat down and actually watched it.
I did the opposite.
Yeah. For the last, for most of the show. So, but. Oh
man. Yeah. In other news, Doom Patrol adds another cast member as Karen Oblivium. You did that on purpose, right? You knew.
Yeah.
You saw it. You're like, Sarah's gonna have fun with that. Sorry, Karen. And she's gonna play Ronnie Evers.
Yeah.
Evers on Doom Patrol.
Yeah, so apparently this character, they're doing a gender swap here, because there's a Ronald Evers who is Cyborg's enemy, and he's in the military, and he even calls himself Cyborg. So this looks like it's a recurring role. I guess she's going to be playing opposite Cyborg on Doom Patrol. So, of course, we still haven't gotten a firm release date yet. Some point this year, sometime in the summer. But yeah, it's just clearly they are getting back into production, and can't wait for season 2.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. But knowing scheduling these days, it's going to drop with everything else, and there's just going to be a landslide of content. And I think part of the beauty of Doom Patrol is when it hit, there was not as much competition. So I'm very
Right.
curious to see and understand when they're going to drop it. Meanwhile, Disney Plus is trying to up their game by bringing it back two IPs, because that's what we do in Hollywood these days,
Exactly.
including my childhood sports movie franchise, The Mighty Ducks, with Emilio Estevez, and Rick Moranis is going to come back for the first time since he left the business and return for a reboot of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Yeah, yeah. It
With
was
our young kids for life again.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I think I read him quoted somewhere where he was joked and said, when he was coming back, he's like, it should be a Honey I Shrunk the Grandkids, because
seriously.
yeah, but it's good to see him back. I know a lot of folks are disappointed that he didn't do the Ghostbusters reboot a few years ago and not in this one, but he said, why would I come back for one shot for something I did 30 years ago? So, but yeah, it's he did some voice work, but yeah, he's been pretty much ever since after his wife passed away. He pretty much dropped off the radar, other than doing some voice acting here and there. So it's good to see him back.
Yeah, and it's I think that alone is gonna cause nostalgia to attract people back to that franchise. I don't know about Mighty Ducks. I have no idea. I associate that so much with the 90s distinctly
Hmm.
that I don't know if it's gonna work.
Yeah, well, apparently I was reading about it. I guess the Ducks now are, it's not so much a rags to riches story. Now they are the riches, and so they're going to be updating it to present day. And I guess Emilio Estevez is in it. I think Laura Graham is going to be in it as well.
Please
And
tell me Joshua Jackson. Like
yeah,
you gotta have a spot for Joshua Jackson.
yeah, you definitely do. You definitely do. So we shall see.
The duck is all grown up. Excellent. All right, that's it for us with the news. And then this is not deja vu, but we are going to be talking Picard and Flash. Um, let's start with Star Trek, Will's
Yes.
favorite.
Let's start with Star Trek, definitely. This is episode 3 that we're talking about tonight. So I really like this episode because finally we're going somewhere, literally. Because the first 2 episodes was definitely reintroducing Jean Luc, or JL, as Rafi, his former executive officer, when he was Admiral Picard would call him, and we get more context as far as why the Sphinx were um, banned and why Picard left Starfleet. We basically got the scene where he had just come back from talking with the admirals, and as far as the Romulan resettlement after the Romulan sun went supernova, and Starfleet was backing off, etc. But the real thing that stuck out to me in this episode with John Luke is, he was really an arrogant son of a bitch.
Oh yeah, he's a bastard. No, he
I,
he has a lot of ego and a lot of
yes.
pride, and I think that is actually something we see in a lot of these characters
Mhm.
who the franchise they've quote unquote outgrown. And we were talking about this last week about Picard, and they've really selected an interesting way to do a human piece because
Yeah.
of the retirement and losing yourself and also losing your mind, and this idea that what you thought your life was is no more. So do you start again? Do you wait it out? Do you take a chance? It was funny to me when you said that, because in my mind the fight sequence popped up, and he was clearly in the way.
Yeah.
He felt like a prop
Yeah.
who they need for dialogue, and they're just like, we're gonna push you over here while the young adults can fight it all out.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. But but as a fan, and it's really, I'm glad, some folks were, I was having some dialogue with people about, Next Generation, and why, would love to see some of the classic characters from Next Generation show up, like Geordi and Riker, which Riker is, I think, on this week's episode. But, it really, it's really a good, I'm glad they have a new cast and a new group of characters to really, like, because you could fall into that hero worship trope so easy. And one of the issues that people, looking back, many years later with Next Generation, and how perfect Starfleet officers were, and how perfect Jean-Luc was and stuff, and there was no conflict and those kind of things in Star Trek. Whereas now, we, with this new series, you did touch on it a little bit in the episodes, especially when Picard in Next Generation would have Q as a foil in episodes.
Mm-hmm.
But you really get to see that that arrogance play out, because Raffi tried to tell him 14 years ago, from the present day in the Star Trek, in the current universe, the Romulans are plotting something, and they're doing this to their own people,
right,
or to their own end. And he was like, no, they would never do anything like that. And then, of course, fast forward present day, of course, like, he's like, yeah, I thought of that. And Raffi's like, and everybody, I'm sitting there as a viewer like, oh, no, Jean-Luc, someone else that thought of that very thing. And it's just a very, it was just a very, I like the way they did that characterization of, like you said, of ego and him trying to find his place, but also always thinking he's right, and he's the captain or the admiral, and he's always right. And it was just a very, I won't say subtle, but it was a very good storytelling point of how they showed that, and how he at this point is he is at the mercy of Raffi and other people to go do this mission.
Well, and he's just as much at fault for what happened to Mars as everyone else. I mean, mm-hmm. I go back to that interview moment in the first episode where he gets very defensive about the decision to help the Romulans, and he was a voice in that, on mm-hmm. making sure that they did, and why that was the right thing to do. And now, as he's realizing that maybe it was all a trick, and there's something else in the plans for the Romulans, and they were connected to this attack, he was wrong, and mm-hmm. and that's humility, and I like that. I will be honest, sometimes it really is hard for me to fully understand exactly what's happening, because they do not shy away from referring to things where, if you have not seen it, you have no idea what they're talking about. That being said, I also appreciate how I'm slowly understanding more about the Romulans through everything that they're doing with Hugh and Soji. Mm-hmm. Who we encounter. Now they're Borgs, right? They're infected Borgs.
Yeah. So Hugh, just for backstory, for you and our listeners who maybe not as deeply versed in Trek. So Hugh was a Borg that the Enterprise during the Next Generation came about, and he was still a part of the collective. And he was he was a teenager, and they brought him aboard, and over with his, since he was no longer a part of part of his group,
Right,
he
right.
began to his true self became to come out, and so they ended up deciding to send him back to the collective, and because of his emergence as a being, he basically created basically a wedge in the Borg that a few seasons later, these Borgs are all free will and no longer part of the collective.
Mm-hmm. So Ramada.
Yeah.
So she's a Borg too.
Right. But apparently so the people that were part of this reclamation project are apparently it seems that they were Borg who somehow got separated from the collective. So that's why the Romulans are so
In a very interesting way. I guess what I'm getting at, which I thought was cool, is how it felt as if they were quarantined in a mental institute, like how people who don't think or behave in a normal quote unquote way get shipped off and isolated and confined to a space where and I thought that was really a really subtle nod to that, in my opinion at least.
Yeah.
And everything with Soji, who comes in and thinks that she can talk the talk and make a breakthrough, and her figuring out these ways to really make Ramada open up and give her some answers. I like everything with the cards, and especially this idea that, Deja is still very a part of the show in a way.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, she died in the first episode and really kicked off this whole these events that is leading John Luke to go find Soji, her sister, but she's now part of this prophecy or this myth about two sisters, and there's a destroyer.
Yep.
Which is really I like it. I like that idea that these it goes back to like this idea of a Gemini twin, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, that I totally like. Yeah, I totally like that whole sequence. Another thing too is, getting to the. I like your analogy of it being almost like a hospital or something, or a mental ward for these separated individuals. And who better? What I liked about it was who better to make executive director of that whole project is he.
Right.
Because he can identify with what these XBs or X-Borg are dealing with, because he went through it, and clearly he and Soji, they clearly have worked together for a long time, because whenever Ramada was like dealing with her issues, he turned to Soji to like help try to draw her out.
Because he wants to get in Soji's pants.
Nah, I don't think so.
Yep. I saw the looks.
Oh no. Well, maybe. She's got that young strapping Romulan that he's got to get through, though.
Trust me, as soon as he figures out who she really is, he's going to be very attracted.
Yeah, it's like Data's daughter. You can't be dating Data's daughter here. Come on now.
Jeez. So now we do meet another character. We meet the pilot in this episode.
Yep.
And so here are my thoughts about the pilot. Man, is Rios it just was full. Every time Rios was on the screen, I was just like, this is Mandalorian. I just went there and I could not help it. And then once I thought it, I couldn't unseen it, and it really bothered me.
So is it the Mandalorian vibes, as far as just he is a hired gun with no connections and just all about the money, and yet by the end of the series, he's going to be like this is my child. This is my family. This.
No, he's gonna be like, this is my grandfather. I'm gonna have to take care of him in his old age.
Yeah. 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 When I saw you put that on the rundown, I was like, yeah, come to think of it.
It felt like as soon as you see him and he has this sharp shrapnel in him,
Mm-hmm.
and you're just looking and you're like, okay, all right, so we're gonna go down this Lone Ranger route with him, bring in some Western elements.
Yeah.
And it's hard. I mean, I think that's part of the problem. Not problem, but has always been an issue with Star Trek is you're in constant competition with Star Wars, because of one tiny connective thread. They both take place in space.
Yeah, just that
Not
little
really
thread.
themes or anything, but just the fact of location alone.
Yeah, yeah.
Fiction. So it was interesting, and maybe it's also because Mandalorian we just wrapped up so recently. It's still in the back of a lot of our minds.
Yeah, yeah. But you're right though. I mean, there's the ship. There. I mean, obviously the space, the obvious connection. But I mean, there are some similarities in Captain Rios and Mando, as far as their quests.
You can even say Han Solo. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a very and this is nothing about the actor. I actually liked his performance. I like the character. However, he is a trope, and I've seen him now a lot of times. Most recently in Mandalorian, Han Solo, of course, is the one we always go to. Yeah. But these characters who's like, that's not my fight. You're going to pay me, or this is what's going to happen. And then by the end of it, they're suddenly a part of the mission.
Exactly. And also the part of the trope. I mean, he is ex-Starfleet, and of course Han Solo was ex-Imperial, as far as the Academy is that we was made canon by the movie. And so you're totally right. He is that trope character, which I'm glad they actually have the foil of him as the emergency medical hologram.
That was yeah, exactly. That was the creative twist they needed to bring something new to the table. I really did like that part, because I like this idea of, and there's, which makes me think there's a lot of duality going on right now. I mean, we're dealing with two sisters who twin sisters, identical, separated. We're dealing with Romulans versus humans, and we have sleeper agents in Starfleet who are trying to conform and passed off, and this idea of the differences and the similarities that are causing all of these problems. So I think that was a nice touch and a continuation of this whole idea about duality. I mean, John Luke, on one end, you're an old man. On the other end, you're a former Starfleet captain. And that's a hard persona to let go of.
Right. Yeah. That you're completely on point there as far as the whole this issue of duality in this series, and it's always those types of storytelling. It's always good to play that off of each other, and so especially whenever we were on the Romulan, on the Borg cube, and she was playing the tarot card, the Romulan tarot cards, and figuring out this connection, and then also the duality of it, because when they were having that sequence on the Borg cube, back on Earth, you were seeing the Jacques Vaught, the super secret Tal Shiar, fighting with Picard and his Romulan housekeepers, innkeepers. And, so you had, so again, like you're saying, Deja is still, even though she was lost in the first episode, her presence is still there, because, while they were discussing this issue on the cube, sometime back on Earth, this other stuff was happening. So it was just a well constructed episode, I thought, and really gets us going somewhere. And then of course, and then and of course Rafi working through her PTSD issues and her being broken because of what happened 14 years ago with Picard, and of course, again, going back to the tropes, of course she's going to come along, but at the same time, Jean-Luc, definitely gave her, I guess, by them re-encountering each other, it gave her a purpose again, because she had lost all her purpose in life, and she was just living out in Vasquez Rocks, just hanging out and just sort of biding her time, and just was very broken. I mean, to the point where she's like, I don't have a security clearance and all these other things, and so even though at first her reunion with Picard was very bitter and very hard, it gave her an opportunity to one, fulfill what she foresaw 14 years prior, and two, it gives us an opportunity to find out what's going on with Bruce Maddox.
Yeah, and no, I like that there's some momentum. I will be honest, though, still not my favorite episode. The pilot is still number one for me. Mm-hmm. And my biggest issue is it still feels like what you said at the top of this discussion is that now we're getting somewhere. We have the ship. We're headed to space. We have the crew. It took us a few episodes to get there, to get the mission. But now we're flying now. Yeah. And I'm excited. There's momentum. And even though I don't like these kind of episodes where it's just about getting from point A to point B. I will commend the writers that they are truly committed to this story. Mm-hmm. There isn't any there isn't any, we're going to go off and do an adventure over here, and then we'll return to the main plot next week.
Yeah. Right.
Those kind of detours that drive me crazy. They're not pulling any Teen Titan BS here. Yep. And I like that, because I also only after 3 episodes have full faith that the writers started this knowing exactly where they wanted to end up.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
And that's huge. Now, if they do me wrong, we will never talk Star Trek again. Oh, man. But speaking about duality, let's jump over to Central City, because we also have some hijacking happening and some, this episode. Again, this is not a deja vu of Seen and Nerd, but I will say it just like I did last week. It's not a bad episode. Just a typical Flash episode.
Yeah. Yeah. After such a strong return with the mid-season premiere, I didn't dislike the episode. You're right. But it was, again, there's 2 things. I loved the story they had going with Barry and Iris this week. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was a very strong through thread that, honestly, I wouldn't have cared if they had a B story, because, honestly, I'm just going to go ahead and put it out there. As far as this whole Allegra character and that B story they had this week, I'm not invested in this character yet to really get any kind of, attachment to, and as far as, what was going on and her feelings. And, the same with Nash Wells. I mean, Nash just showed up like, beginning of this season, the same old Flash tropes of, we got to have a new Wells. So it's sort of like, okay, that kind of stuff, honestly, until the end of the episode, I really didn't care about Nash and Allegra and Frost and all that kind of stuff. But I have to give kudos to the writers on the Iris story. I mean, I did suspect from the very beginning, especially with the pancakes and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, something that, when she got pulled into the mirror, the prior episode, she got swapped or something like that. But then it did the great thing of the speech, and I just absolutely love that moment where Candace I mean, she just acted her ass off, but with when she told Barry, "Look, I've been, dealing with trying to come to grips with you not being here," and it seemed, and what really worked for me with that was, one, it goes back, kind of goes back to the end of, let's see, season. Where did he go off into the Speed Force? Season 4? Into season 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Where's going with this?
Yeah, it's hard to believe it's been 6 years with this series, but yeah. So yeah, I guess it was into season 3. Yeah, he reemerged out of the Speed Force season 4. So she's been down this road before, where she's had to deal with him going away, and then now with Crisis, him going away permanently. So I that was a very believable, her frustrations and her, like, stop being super overprotective and bananas, all that stuff. It was like, I really liked that because it was very real. And again, it again tied back to Crisis and the ramifications of Crisis. So all this build up, we're still dealing with the fallout of it. So I liked that piece. And that was where I was like, oh, well, maybe she didn't get switched in the mirror universe.
Yeah, they kind of toyed with everyone, and you're right to commend the writers for that, because as much as we saw her come out of the mirror and instantly we're like, she got hijacked, that's not her. They did it in a way where you really were questioning it through Barry's eyes. You really felt like you were him watching this behavior, and then them pulling on the motivations that we've watched Iris grow just as long as we've watched Barry grow, and those are legit concerns. And she has grown up, and she isn't a damsel, and that's always been the curse of Iris West. She's constantly compared to Lois Lane, being that damsel character. However, I don't know. It just felt in the back of my mind, despite best effort, and it was really good effort, I still was constantly like, and they're just going to save it for the final few minutes to show that she really is still locked up.
Yep.
And it was something else I couldn't help but keep thinking about is our criticism of Iris leading into Crisis, where she didn't seem so upset that Barry was going to die.
Yeah.
I remember a lot of that talk.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying what she said was wrong or not genuine about planning a life without him. It just, there was something about it where I was like, yeah, you were real torn up about that at the time. And I think they're still trying to figure out that push and pull. Also, maybe why this episode didn't work as well for me as maybe it did for other people is that I'm an Elicity shipper, and I've seen this episode play out on Elicity before, i.e. Arrow. I call it Elicity when it's just me.
You're in a safe zone here.
It's the same thing. It's the same fight we get from these couples time and time again.
Yeah.
And it just, and then you add on the lovely Flash. What is that called? What is it? Like, it's not kitsch. It's just, quote unquote fun. I don't know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
I didn't care for the Flash this week. I don't. Amunet Black.
Yeah.
Katie Sackhoff still nailing that character. Did not need to see her with Golden Man, Golden Eye, Gold Boy.
Yeah, Goldface. I always want to call him like Golden Eye, but it's Goldface.
Goldface. He has a gold chain, not a gold face.
Yeah. yeah, that whole bit was just reeked of season 4 for me, and it
I was trying to figure out the comparison.
yeah yeah, that was where again it was just like, oh god, did someone like let the old showrunner back in hit into the room because it was just like, oh god, we're back to season 4 nonsense. And yes, yeah, Katie Sackhoff, she did do a tremendous job just eating up, chewing the scenes left and right and all. But and you know, I was thinking of our conversation last week about the Flash, as far as like when you have a good through line and then they go off and do these like weird B and C stories that like really undercut the strong A story. Like they wish they did have a very strong A story this week with Barry and Iris trying to figure out their post-crisis relationship, and yeah, and it just got so undermined by that piece and that part. So it was, you know, it was just, it definitely took me out of the episode for whenever those moments came on. I mean, I did laugh a little bit out loud. I mean, I'm not gonna be like completely like, oh, it sucked, blah blah blah. But I mean, there were a couple of moments I did laugh with some of that stuff at the end, but still, it just, you know, but it did overall hurt the episode for me, at least.
Yeah, yeah. I again, Flash. It's and I'm
But
sorry, but part of the reason that the Flash is bothering me is they built their entire first half of the season around Crisis.
mhm,
And as much as last week's episode had to do with Crisis, it felt very much like they put all of that on hold to go off of this,
yeah,
to go down this rabbit hole.
yeah,
And I just that's they always do this to us. They give it's as if the writers start a storyline for Barry and then they get distracted by 5 other characters
hmm
and then they start story threads only to realize, oh, we forgot about Barry, so let's pull it all back together and
yeah,
let's get just stay consistent and
yeah, yeah. There's
go to the Batwoman writer's room and take some notes.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. One thing that I did like though at the end of the episode, speaking of Nash and the random characters that just sort of we got to figure out what to do with them. The moment where we saw another a Wells who looked a lot like Harry, I had thoughts on that. I think it's actually Thawne, possibly. He probably just secreted himself in the negative speed force and survived Crisis. If it is Harry, if it's a vision of Harry, maybe it's just because Nash is feeling guilty about, you know, being an absentee dad to Allegra or something like that. But I just, yeah, if they're going to bring another version of this character back, it's got to be Thawne, because that's that one. You know, one of the big complaints people had about Crisis is you built all this up about Barry and the Reverse Flash having this showdown, and then in a crisis, and it didn't happen. So that's why I'm
A lot of
thinking it's
things
Thawne.
didn't happen in Crisis, like Barry Allen dying.
Hey, well, Barry Allen did die, but not our Barry.
Regardless, stop
Yeah.
being technical. Speaking of fatherhood, you have your 5-minute Black Lightning rant.
Oh, I need more than
Come
five.
on,
I need
Will.
more than 5 minutes. I should have like shut up more about the Flash, because
That's
Black
what
Lightning.
I was thinking, but you
Yeah.
gave her 5 minutes, so hurry up.
No, we got 10 minutes left. I'm looking at the clock. So, so Black Lightning. People are like Well, they're not sleeping on this show now, because I'm seeing them like trend on Twitter like on Monday nights, and this I think was like probably, if not the best, one of the best episodes that this series has done, and it's the penultimate episode. We've been building up all season with the ASA and the Markovian War. So we get and also new supporting characters who are used in a good way throughout the season. And so Jefferson put the team together to go rescue Lynn from Markovia. And so, of course, we had the moment with Khalil dealing with him still trying to come to the consequences of being Painkiller and the ASA agent. We have Brandon, who is, we see all the training that they're doing with ASA, and they finally do get to go off to Markovia. And there were some creepy moments with TC and this new character, Erica, who can basically collect kinetic energy and then redistribute it. And so the long and short of it is, so in the comic books, a lot of these characters are based off the Outsiders, which was a team that Batman formed with Black Lightning. And so, so basically all throughout the season, Grace Joy, TC, Geoforce, well, Brandon, but he's basically Geoforce. They all come together to go to Markovia to rescue Lynn, and each person has, in this raid, a role in the rescue. And one of the cool things was this week, Wayne Brady guest starred as Gravedigger, and I say, Wayne, the dude's, if you've watched Hughes Line Is It Anyway, you know what a talent he is, but he really got to display it again this week on the episode, playing Gravedigger, who is a meta with superhuman strength, super stamina, but also had this power to use his voice to bend people to do his bidding. And he utilized that against Lynn to try to get her to make the serum to basically stabilize all the metas they had in Markovia. But great little twist what they did with that. But I just really, really, I was looking forward, when I saw he was cast, I had been looking forward to seeing how this episode and seeing Gravedigger, and did not fail to disappoint. There's a great fight sequence between him and Painkiller, or now Khalil, that would make James Bamford proud from Arrow. So I thought that was a good mix. And then of course there was a nice little twist at the end in the mission that, as you recall, Jefferson had Tobias was also taken to Markovia, was kidnapped and taken there, and had they needed him because, again, he's a stable meta. The Markovians were also going to use him, but Jefferson had to release him. So there was a great moment in the episode between Jefferson and Tobias that it was sparks were flying off the screen, not because Jefferson was shooting lightning bolts. So it was this season. Definitely recommend to folks if you are looking for a new series to pick up as far as in the DC TV universe. I would have to say Black Lightning season 3 definitely has delivered very well, just like how Supergirl season 4 was for us last year, how Batwoman is coming for us this year. It's been a very solid season, great characterization. It's just great. It's just been a really awesome ride, and I'm glad it got renewed for season 4 because the show is really hitting a stride, and I see great things for it as we move to season 4.
Very. Will, why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you?
Yes, you can find me at Will M. Polk. That's WILLMPOLK.
And you can find me at SJ Belmont, SJBELMONT. Both please follow our crew on Twitter at Scene and Nerd, friend us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, but most importantly, rate, subscribe, and comment on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Good night, Geek Out. You're welcome.